Today is a very special day because it has been very nearly a year since I posted the first video on this channel. Of course, this would be the week that I caught the worst cold that I've had in years, which is why it kind of sounds like I've been gargling cheese graters, but this is the best that my voice has sounded in a couple of days, so this is what you guys get. But anyways, hi, I'm Jess, part-time hobbit, and today I am going to celebrate 1 year of posting on this channel by answering all of your fabulous questions. I got so many great questions, but unfortunately I'm not going to be able to answer every single one, so if I don't get to your question, I'm very sorry, but I am super grateful to you for sending them in. If the human race were obliterated, and at some future point aliens came to Earth and discovered the corpus of Tolkien's works, what would you hope they'd take away about humanity after exploring these works? First off, it would be that there were tiny 4-foot people called hobbits running around for much of humanity's existence. But other than that, I think the prevailing and most important message in Tolkien's works really is hope. But at the end of The Two Towers, the movie, they wrote in this speech that Sam has, and I'll include the clip of specifically what I'm talking about here.
What are we holding on to, Sam? There's some good in this world, Mr. Frodo. And it's worth fighting for.
And so much of Tolkien's works are infused with this hope. He brings humanity to the very brink of collapse, of destruction, and shows that it can still be saved and that it's still worth saving. So if aliens were to learn anything about humanity from Tolkien's works, I would hope that it would be that we were creatures of hope, creatures that could look on insurmountable odds and decide to still hope. That was a great question. Thank you very much. Where do you get your outfits? Because your style is always on point. Thank you, first of all. I will say that I don't look like this most of the time. The version of me that you guys see before you once a week is very carefully curated, and that's important to remember. Don't think that I live like this all the time, because that's setting unachievable standards for yourself. A lot of my stuff is things that I've had for years. I won't say that I'm perfect and that I never buy new clothing, but I do hold on to a lot of the stuff that I've had for a while. A decent amount of it is thrifted, either from in-person thrift stores or from the website ThredUp. Not sponsored. And then of course it's stuff that I've also made or modified myself. What are my hobbies? That's interesting because right now you could argue that I don't technically really have any. I turned things that previously were my hobbies, such as crafting and reading books and diving into media, into both my job that actually makes me money and this channel. In a way, I'm doing my hobby every day. That is also how I make my money, so I don't know if that gets to count as a hobby. It's been my goal for a long time for the year 2024 to be the year where I get hobbies back, where I have enough time to do hobbies, and that may include making music. I like to sing, I've been singing for years, but just haven't had time for it, as well as playing instruments, that kind of thing, maybe a little more art, and ideally sewing and crafting just for the fun of it a little bit more. My daughter fell in love with Tolkien's work at age 5, and a few years later now believes him to be the greatest writer who ever lived. What do you believe is that unique alchemy that Tolkien weaves, which is so inspiring and moving to many people, young or old? This is, I think, an interesting phenomenon, because I noticed this with a lot of people. There's something about the way that Tolkien writes stories, and the way that, as I've talked about in so many videos, he pulls from past storytelling tradition to infuse it into his story and kind of make a new mythos that I think taps into a very primordial part of the human brain. One of my coworkers is reading Lord of the Rings for the first time, and she keeps talking about how interesting it is that she's seeing all of these things that he, essentially invented, that have now become staples of the fantasy genre. Because the Lord of the Rings is kind of the father of all fantasy, I think it taps very well into the human brain's desire for fantasy and kind of epitomizes it. So I would say the reason that so many people like the Lord of the Rings is because it is such a fundamentally human work of art, and it's one of the best examples of pure, good storytelling. This next one is, who's your favorite cousin? I have a sneaking suspicion that that question came from one of my cousins. However, there are 18 of you at this point, maybe more, I don't know, there's probably more somewhere. And it could be a decent number of you asking this question, so I will just say, whoever ask that question, you're my favorite cousin. Aside from the obvious Anglo-Saxon influence on the Rohirrim, what cultures do you think Tolkien specifically had in mind as rough templates for the Noldor, Sindar, dwarves, Lake Town, Gondor, etc.? And what cultures do you like to picture when thinking of these peoples in Middle-earth? This is probably actually going to be the basis of a series that I start sometime in the relatively near future, where I talk about the different races of Middle-earth and the mythic and historic influences that Tolkien may have taken. And then I'm also starting a series that talks about the locations of Middle-earth, kind of like I did for costumes, but goes into the locations that inspired the movies. So I'm going to be talking a lot more about this stuff, so I won't get into specifics. But I will say that I think trying to move away in your mind from the Peter Jackson interpretation of Middle-earth, such as with books like this, The Illustrated World of Tolkien. This has a lot of fantastic illustrations from artists that weren't drawing from the Peter Jackson style, and it can kind of give you a refreshed vision of Middle-earth. And so looking into books like that, because it can be a lot of fun to picture these cultures in something outside of the Peter Jackson vision. So I will definitely explain more of that kind of stuff in later videos. Where should I go with my reading after the trilogy and The Hobbit? I've never read any other Tolkien, but I know it's out there. Okay, so this is a great place to be in because you really do have a world of opportunity, there's a lot more out there. I would say it depends on your proclivities as a reader. If the thing that really fascinated you were the hints of lore that you got in the story, or the history that you could see was there, I might encourage you to give the Silmarillion a try. I will warn you, it's a little bit dense, but it's a lot of fun and you get to learn a lot more about Middle-earth as a whole. Now, if you kind of liked the drama, the romance, the fantasy side of things, picking up Beren and Luthien can be a lot of fun because it has a lot of Tolkien's notes as well as what we have of that actual story, and that can be a lot of fun. If you're someone who likes kind of the hard-hitting drama and the tension and stuff, then the Tale of Túrin, the Children of Húrin is what it's called, but it's the Tale of Túrin Túnambar. It's kind of like Tolkien's Game of Thrones, I would say. And I'm also going to take this opportunity to shout out on fairy stories, particularly if you are a creator, especially a writer or an author or a storyteller. His essay on fairy stories, which has its own published book, is a great read in terms of diving into his personal philosophy about creation and creativity. All of these stories really interconnect as a history, so typically once you pick up one, it's very easy to go, oh, I want to read more about this specific character, and to dive into it from there. Do you have any academic background in art, anthropology, or languages? I graduated in 2021 with a bachelor's in theater, specifically in acting performance. Mine was not a BA program though, so I ended up studying a lot of other things outside of just acting, including a decent amount of music and music theory, practical technical theater, as well as a decent amount of philosophy, directing, playwriting, and just courses that had me reading and synthesizing information a lot. But beyond that, I really just Google stuff. I even have huge gaps in my knowledge about Tolkien, but most of what I do for these videos is just to Google things and to read as many articles and take in as much information from experts as I can so that I can synthesize it into these videos. What's your favorite Tolkien work? For a while now, I guess it's been 10 years since I kind of discovered it, The Tale of Beren and Luthien. And that was kind of my first step into saying, oh, this Tolkien guy wrote other stuff that I also enjoy. Beren and Luthien was kind of my first step on that journey, and so it holds a very special place in my heart. I'd love to hear your thoughts on how Tolkien's work has interacted with culture, when he wrote them, over the decades, and in the resurgence of Tolkien love with the release of Peter Jackson's trilogy. Do you think that modern fans receive his work differently than audiences when he wrote it? What do you think his work has meant to the different generations that have consumed it? In some ways, I think across all of those generations, there has been the same impact of it, where it's this realization that new myths can be created and can be enjoyed just like ancient ones. But I also think that each generation has been impacted differently, and that's because these stories get reinterpreted every time. Someone that was, middle-aged when the books first came out and read them and enjoyed them and it changed their lives back then is going to be impacted differently than me, who first took these stories in when I was 2 years old and barely understood what was happening on the screen in front of me. Obviously, the impact is going to be slightly different, but I think that the core messaging of the story, the message of hope and persistence and love and happy endings, I think that has remained consistent throughout generations. Would you want any of the other Tolkien books to be made into movies? This is kind of interesting in lieu of the news that we got literally a week ago that there are more Lord of the Rings movies coming. If you didn't know that, I'll link the article in the description. I know that most of the movies that they're considering having made are going to be focusing on the Third Age, I believe, because that's what they have rights for. So that's events in, around, right before and after The Lord of the Rings. However, if I could make a movie out of any of them, it would definitely be his earlier works. It would be the things that haven't necessarily been touched, such as The Tale of Túrin or Beren and Luthien, because those are like the most substantial stories that we have. I also think there's something to be said for the fact that it's okay to make stories that aren't adaptations, and I'd love to see new fantasy being made maybe in the vein of Tolkien, but not specifically being like Tolkien. So if I could see any of his previous works being adapted, it would either be an animated Farmer Giles of Ham, or it would be a TV version of The Tale of Beren and Luthien. What are my other fandoms? Unfortunately, much of my reading life has been kind of dominated by The Lord of the Rings lately, but I've had a lot of other fandoms that I've been a part of. But I used to watch a lot of anime and read a lot of manga. I really love Terry Pratchett. I've been reading a lot of that. I've been reading some Joe Abercrombie, a little bit of Brandon Sanderson here or there, though I haven't fully dived into that. I've recently been getting really into Dune. Dylan made me read that, and I've really been enjoying diving a little deeper into that world, and maybe diving a little more into sci-fi in general, because that's never something I've been a particularly huge fan of until now. And that is going to be our last question, since I am starting to sound worse and worse. However, I have a couple of questions for you guys. So be sure to comment to let me know what other fandoms you guys are a part of, because A, I want suggestions for new material, and B, I want to know what other content outside of Tolkien you guys might like to see. And then also, if you know, let me know how long you've been with the channel, because I'm really curious. Has it been a couple of weeks, couple of months? You know, let me know. And before I wrap things up, I just wanted to mention that this has been such a crazy year for me personally. I've lived in 2 different homes, soon to be 3 in the upcoming weeks. I've worked 3 different jobs, and having this channel as a constant in my life has been really, really important to me. So whether you found this channel a year ago when I posted that first video, or you just found me yesterday, I want to thank you for being willing to join me in this journey. It's been crazy and stressful and incredibly, incredibly fulfilling, and I don't know what I'd do without it. So thank you, as always, so much for watching this video and all of my other videos, and I hope that you all have a very happy, hobbity day.